Good morning. Okay, so we're on page 4. And let's go over briefly what we've done until now. So in the beginning of the Maimer, it talks about the matzah is a mitzvah. And he explains that it's not just a mitzvah to remember that we went out of Mitzrayim, but it's actually a mitzvah that has in it a certain power, and that has the power to give us amunah, based on what it says in the Zohar. Then he begins the discussion, what is amunah? And he explains there are 2 types of amunah. One level of amunah, which every person is expected to have, which is the general amunah that Hashem created the world, and Hashem gives life to the world. And that would be similar to the way the neshama gives life to the body. And that is what he calls bitul hayesh, which means that is recognizing and acknowledging that the world has its own sort of independent identity to some degree, but Hashem is super, and he controls the world, and he gives life to the world. But nevertheless, the world does have its own identity, like the body also has its own identity. But the neshama is invested in the body and gives life to the body. And we use the term that the guf is tafel to the neshama. The guf is secondary. When you say that one thing is primary and the other thing is secondary, that doesn't negate the second thing at all. It just says this is more important and this is less important. So one of the ways of looking at the neshama and the guf is that the neshama is the most important. That provides us with life. And the body is also important, and it has substance, it has its own identity, but it's secondary to the neshama. In a similar way, one could perceive the entire universe that way. That the universe is like a guf, a huge body, and Hashem is the one who gives life to this world. But the world in itself has its own identity and has certain substance and importance. And Hashem, though, is the primary, and the rest of the world itself is secondary. But then he said there's a deeper level of Amunah, and that's mainly what the matzah is here to provide us with, that deeper level of Amunah. And the deeper level of Amunah is to understand that the world is batul b'mitzias. Not bitl yesh, but batul b'mitzias. And what does bittul b'mitzias means? Total bittul, complete bittul. Not that the world is something that has its own independent existence, but it is sort of inferior and secondary to something higher and greater. Thank you, Maya. But it means that the world actually doesn't have its own independent substance at all, doesn't have its own independent identity at all. It is all an extension of, an expression of Hashem, because without Hashem, it couldn't exist, which is different than the soul and the body. The body could continue to exist without the soul, as we see it. But the world wouldn't exist without Hashem in it. So this bittul is called bittul b'mitzias. It's total bittul, that the world has absolutely no substance without Hashem. And then he goes on to say that surely this is the emes, this is the way it's in actuality, but it's very difficult for us to perceive that. So what we perceive is this idea, but in a very small, sort of condensed level, on a level that we can relate to it. And this is what happened when Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. While they were in Mitzrayim, their level of Amunah was the first level, Bitla Yesh. When they went out of Mitzrayim, they were able to rise to the higher level of Amunah. And what enabled them to have that higher level of Amunah? The matzah. Because matzah is not just symbolic, but matzah is actually something that through the matzah, it empowers us. The matzah is something which is very potent. It has tremendous spiritual power. By eating the matzah, it enables us to have that amunah. Then he goes on to say, and here's where we left off last week, that just like the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim then, which is over 3,300 years ago, we know that we're commanded that we should always, in every generation, perceive ourselves as if we went out of Mitzrayim this generation, and in a certain sense, every day. And that is during davening, when we daven, we have our Mitzrayim is the Nefesh Bahamis, and the Nefesh Elokis has to free itself from the grip of the Nefesh Bahamis. That's sort of the Yetzias Mitzrayim on a personal level. But to understand it deeper, he explains that every day we have to work on having a deeper, more profound understanding of this idea that Hashem and the world are absolutely one. And this is something which is mainly with a Nefesh Elokis. So first it goes on to explain that even angels, even Malachim, who are so passionate about Hashem, and they have nothing else in their life except for Hashem, but in reality, they can't understand this either. To them, the way they perceive the world is that there is a world, and Hashem created the world, Hashem created them. They have some sort of an identity, and they see that Hashem and the world is one. Hashem gives life to the world, and everything else is secondary. But this understanding, how the world and Hashem is absolutely one, and without Hashem it has no existence whatsoever, that is something which only a neshama could understand, because neshamas are higher than malachim. That's the first part of page 4. And then he went on to speak about it within ourselves. There's also these two levels. One is the Nefesh Elokis and one is the Nefesh Bahamis. So I'd like to back up a little bit and start this piece again. In other words, the difference between the way the Nefesh Bahamis perceives Hashem and the way the godly soul perceives Hashem. So where are we going to start with? Let's start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4, 5, 6 lines from the top, 5 lines from the top. At the end of the line, it says Adar. So first he explains how malachim, even angels, who are such spiritual entities, but nevertheless, they don't understand. They don't have the ability to see the deeper depth of Hashem. They see Hashem more on the finite level. And when you look at it from that perspective, the world does have substance, but Hashem is superior. Hashem is primary and everything else is secondary. Avo, but the Neshamas Yisrael, the Neshamas of Yidden, the Meshachim and Chochmasa Yisbarach. The Neshama of Yidden come from Hashem's faculty of Chochmah, the sphere of Chochmah. In fact, that's what we learn in the 2nd chapter of Tanya, how Yidden are called the children of Hashem, just like a child comes from the Chochmah of the Father. That's how the Neshamas of Yidden, the Nefesh Elokis, comes from Hashem's sphere of Chochmah. And what's unique about Chochmah? She Elokus Mamish Veinam Nifrodim Klau. In other words, even in the spheres, there are different levels. This is not the place to go into it at length and elaborate on it, but even the spheres, there are different levels, and Chochmah, which is the highest of the 10 spheres, that's the sphere that it's absolutely one with Hashem. The next sphere, which is Bina, even though it's also subservient to Hashem, and it's a manifestation of Hashem, but it's still not that same degree of oneness. So neshamas, we come from the sphere of chokhmah. And therefore we have that ability, we have the potential also to become one with Hashem and to feel that oneness in a way that even angels can't feel that. The neshama, before it descended to this world, actually was able to perceive this, to perceive godliness, how everything is created mi'ayin liyesh, and therefore they understood bittul in a complete way, in an absolute way, that the whole world is batal b'mitzias. Ze'opchinas gadlus mamish kanal. That's the higher level, the bigger level of Amunah. However, shahush b'la nevesh alakiz b'nevesh bahamis. Once the godly soul descended and was invested in a nefesh bahamis, shalamata down here, nefesh bahamis, and the nefesh bahamis is even lower than the malachim kanal. So yesh gomer. Nefesh bahamis is, of course, lower than the nefesh alakiz. Its source is higher than the angels. But the Nefesh Bahamis is certainly lower than the angels, because Nefesh Bahamis is a force within a person that's attracted to all sorts of physical pleasures. So it's really separate from Hashem, not in a subtle way, but in a very coarse way. And the reason why the Nefesh Elokis was invested by Hashem in the Nefesh Bahamis is, of course, to transform it. And to bring the animal soul, that the animal soul should feel batal to Hashem, at least on its level that it could feel it, which is bitla yesh. Be'emunas uman hanal, shazor b'chinas bitla yesh v'katnos. So it means within ourselves we have a godly soul, we have the animal soul. The godly soul in me is capable of understanding Hashem and perceiving godliness on a higher level, and feeling this bittul on a higher level. The animal soul is capable, if it's sort of dealt with and inspired by the godly soul, even the animal part in me could recognize and feel bittul yesh, how Hashem is primary and everything else is secondary. This is the deeper meaning when we say that you have to go out of Egypt every day. We know that on the surface, when you read the Haggadah, and it says that every day a person should see themselves as if they went out of Mitzrayim, first of all, it's not literally, it's as if. And second of all, it's not because something's happening now. What we're saying is that being that over 3,300 years we were out of Egypt, had we not gone out of Egypt, then we'd still be there now. But there's really nothing happening now. According to Chassidus, in fact, there's a very small chapter in Tanya that's dedicated to explain this, chapter 47. The Alter Rebbe says, no, it actually means that every day, every single day, we actually experience going out of Mitzrayim on a personal level, which means we have a Nefesh Elokis, we have a Nefesh Bahamis, and first of all, the Nefesh Elokis shouldn't be limited and shouldn't be restricted and shouldn't be brought down by the godly soul. And second of all, the animal soul itself is also being elevated, that it should be able to feel bitla yesh to Hashem. So that is a process of Yitzias Mitzrayim. What's Yitzias Mitzrayim? Physically, it meant there was a nation. We were held captive by this nation, and we weren't able to live our full potential because we were being held captive, like anybody. If God forbid they're held captive by someone, they're in jail, and they're held captive by an enemy. As a result of that, they're not able to live their potential because someone else is controlling them. So the Nefesh Elokis is being controlled by my Nefesh Bahamis. I'm in Mitzrayim. And if I'm able to free myself of that, that's Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the Nefesh Bahamis is also very much invested in being attracted to and being drawn to all the physical, material things in the world. If the Nefesh Bahamis could free himself of that and recognize even the lower level, bitla yesh, on a personal level, that's Yitzias Mitzrayim. So the person, we say the Shema every day. I just want to point this out. This is also in that chapter of Tanya. There's a mitzvah every day to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? Where do we do it? Where do we pronounce every day that we went out of Mitzrayim? Where?
Morning brachas.
What?
Morning bracha.
Morning bracha. Which one?
Like, thank you for not making me a slave.
That's about slavery, but I don't know if it's Yetzias Mitzrayim. That could be slavery in general, even without Mitzrayim.
After the Hallel, all the Hallel.
After the Hallel?
Well, Hallel.
Oh, you mean Oz Yasha? We're singing the song. Okay, so we got a few answers. They're all correct. One is Oz Yasha. One is the 6 remembrances. And what did you say? Also something. What? Oz Yasha. You said. But the truth is that those parts of davening, those are all parts of davening where we're elaborating on Yetzias Mitzrayim. But the main part, which is considered, here's where we're performing the mitzvah, is in the Shema. What Chava said before, at the end of the Shema, we say, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am God your God, that took you out of Egypt, and so on. So the Alter Rebbe explains why in the world did the sages decide that they would take this mitzvah of going out of Egypt and insert it in the Shema. Aren't they like 2 separate things? Shema is one thing. Remember Hashem is one. And going out of Egypt is remembering that we went out of Egypt. Why is that sort of bunched together? Why were they put together as if they belong to one another? So the answer is, if we understand Yetzias Mitzrayim on a personal level, that means that the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, is freeing itself from the animal soul and its full potential to believe in Hashem the way it's supposed to and connect to Hashem the way it's supposed to. That's Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's Shema. The whole idea of the Shema is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And then that leads to V'ahavta, you should love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. So if a person reaches a point where they're able to love Hashem and accept Hashem with all his soul and all his might and believe in Hashem in the deepest way, that's freeing myself. That's my personal Yetzias Mitzrayim. So once you understand the concept, we realize that going out of Mitzrayim and experiencing the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is one and the same thing, and that's the perfect place where it belongs. Yes, there are more places where we elaborate more on the details, but this is sort of the essential connection. So first of all, the godly soul declares Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, which means Hashem and the world are absolutely one. This is the highest level of understanding how Hashem is one. But then we also want to work on our animal soul. Through this, by the godly soul being inspired, it'll also inspire the animal soul. Because when a person thinks about Hashem, he thinks about it in a way of human understanding that the Nefesh of Bahamas could also relate to it. So this is the deeper meaning of what our sages say. When a person davens, his eyes should be downward and his heart should be upward. Literally, it means when you daven, you keep your eyes down. And the reason for that is because when you see something, you think about it. Your thoughts are always following your eyes. If you look at something, that's what you're going to think about. And therefore, if during davening you're looking around, it'll distract you. You won't be able to concentrate. So the best thing is look downwards, which means you're not looking around and you're not letting anything distract you. But that's your eyes. Your heart, of course, is directed upward. That's the simple meaning. But the deeper meaning is that when a person davens, they have to daven in a certain way. Okay, this needs a little bit of explanation. And I'll try my best to explain it before we do the words inside, and then we'll do the word inside. When we say such words that the godly soul influences the animal soul, what are we referring to? I mean, practically speaking, what does it mean? So it means that Hashem created us in such a way that there's two parts to my psyche, if you want to use that term. There's a part of me that's godly and spiritual and is attracted to spiritual things, gets excited about spiritual things. And there's a part of me, and we call it an animal soul for a reason. Animal soul doesn't mean it's something bad, but it has the same kind of excitement and temptations and attractions, just like an animal, to eating, and sleeping, and drinking, and fun, and all these kind of things. That's what gets the animal excited. So when we love Hashem or we believe in Hashem, which is amazing, which part of me is believing in Hashem? Is that the godly soul and my animal soul right now is dormant? Or even that animal part in me is also believing in Hashem and getting to understand, to value Hashem and being excited about Hashem? That's what it means. The ultimate goal is not just to arouse my godly soul and ignore my animal soul. The ultimate goal is that even the part in me, which is human, which is physical, which is no different than an animal, and again, not in a negative way, but just in a way that it's natural. We have all the natural desires and pleasures and pursuits because this gives us pleasure. That part of me should also get excited about Hashem. And that part of me should also have belief in Hashem. And the question is, why is that so important? So he's going to explain an interesting thing here, and that is that if a person would daven and just involve the godly soul, then later, when he finishes davening and goes out into the world, what he was doing during davening won't have the desired effect on his daily behavior outside of the shul when he goes out into his daily activities. It doesn't say this here, but I'm going to give a mushal to try to understand this. If anybody here ever read the Friedrich Rebbe's memoirs, he describes a lot of what life was like hundreds of years ago, and how there were people who dedicated their whole life for learning and davening, and mainly learning. They spent hours and hours a day. And in those days, there were certain people called Prushim. It's hard to imagine what it is, but we're not talking about ordinary people. These are people who are great Torah scholars, and they very much wanted to be totally, completely devoted to Hashem. So they were Prushim. Prushim means they isolated themselves from everything else. So I'm going to give you an example of one of the Prushim that he describes. This person was in shul, and he was in shul Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Didn't go home. His wife would bring him the food to the shul. What did he do all day? Just learning and davening. That's all he did a whole day. And when he came to go home on Shabbos, he didn't want to even see what's going on outside on the street. So they would blindfold him, and two people would lead him, and he would go home. Now, this person was living like a tzaddik. What? Poor wife. In all the Jewish home classes, they never bring up, don't marry a parish. You're not going to have such an easy life. We don't have such things today. But years ago, there were people who lived on that level. And I guess the wife was somehow also on a different level, whatever, she appreciated it. But that's another discussion. What I want to bring out is this person was really living a very holy life, but you know what kind of life he was living? It's almost as if he wasn't living on planet Earth. In a sense, he's living on a different planet. He's not even exposed to this world because he's in the shul the whole day, davening the whole day, he's blindfolded, so on. What would happen if a person lives like that for 5, 10, 15 years, and then, for whatever reason, he's told, okay, you got to go out there, go to work. And he goes out into the world and he sees a world which he never saw before. He might not know how to handle it in a proper way. Why? Because even though he was very dedicated to Hashem, but he was dedicated in a way where he was disconnected from the world. He never learned how to be in the world, with the world, and in that context, serve Hashem. In a certain sense, that's the same thing with the godly soul and the animal soul. The godly soul is a ball of godliness. It's all godly. And therefore, the godly soul knows only of one thing, which is godliness. And when a person says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the godly soul understands everything on the highest level and so on. If I don't make the effort to understand godliness in a way that even the human part of me, even the natural part of me, should be able to relate to this and feel that love for Hashem and have that belief in Hashem, then when I finish davening and I take off my talis, I go outside into the world and I deal with the world, it's like everything I was thinking before is gone, because right now there is a world that I'm dealing with. I tell the story about a chassid. I mean, it's a little bit different, but a chassid, a very big chassid of the Alter Rebbe, once had a fabrengen. And at the fabrengen, he was speaking actually about this concept, how the world doesn't exist and nothing, everything is batel, einoid mulvade. He was going on, talking about it, elaborating and explaining it. And then he got all excited. He was a very excitable chassid. He got up and he started dancing and singing, and everybody was dancing and singing with him. And they were dancing in a circle. In the room, there, in the wall, there was an oven, like in the matzah bakery, an oven in the wall. And the oven was extended a little bit from the wall. And because the circle was going around and around, it wasn't a perfect circle. So he went a little bit too close to the wall. And as he's dancing with his eyes closed, he went crashing right into the oven. And his first reaction is, looks like an oven does exist. Here he was like, there's no world, nothing exists, it's just Hashem, boom, as that's in cup, it looks like the oven does exist. So basically, you daven and you're in a high, and then you walk out into the world and you see things that you never saw before, and you realize, oh, it does exist, and you don't even know how to handle it. So I have to daven in such a way that with acknowledging the world that exists and the temptations that exist in the world and all the physical, material things that exist in the world, I recognize that it's all secondary to Hashem and how I have to deal with it in a way that Hashem wants. And then I can succeed. So therefore, in davening, we need both. We need to understand Hashem is one, the way it is in the deepest way, level of understanding, which is associated with the godly soul. And we also need to understand it in a way that the animal, the human, the natural part of me can understand it, which is maybe not as profound and not as deep, but it's in a way that I could relate to the world. I recognize, I acknowledge the world exists, but it's bit layesh. Any questions? Follow me? And what I just finished saying, it's not just black and white, it's every person on their level. When you talk about bittul b'mitzias, every person understands it on their level. Bitla yesh, every person understands it on their level. But these are just the general two terms, whether I, like this person who we just described, that isolates themselves from everything, you would call that bittul b'mitzias in a certain extent, that he's so connected to Hashem, the world in his world doesn't exist at all. And bitla yesh is someone who deals with the worldly things. But it's every person on their level, how they understand both. But it means that both have to be sort of experienced, and that's happening in the Shema. So now that we got the concept, let's see if we can read the words inside. Oh, by the way, so this is what it means. The eyes have to be downward. In other words, my heart is upward. I understand the greatness of Hashem. He's absolutely one. But my eyes downward means I have to connect it down to the physical Gashmizdika world with all the things that exist within it. This is similar to what the Rebbe always speaks about when it comes to Simchas Torah, Yaakov Halach and Darko. And the Rebbe explains that, it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Simchas Torah, and we're inspired. And then after it's all over, and we go back to routine, unfortunately, sometimes there's nothing left from that inspiration. So what's the Eitzah? What's the solution to that? The solution is that when I'm on my high, my eyes should be downwards. In other words, when a person is in that high and inspired, in my mind, I should also connect it to something that's going to be later, practical, technical, down to earth, and make the connection between the heaven and earth in my own personal life. Otherwise, it's just pure heaven and it doesn't connect to earth.
I have a question.
Yep.
So Bittul the Metzius is kind of from the worldly things, but wouldn't the person be reminded of the human, like the human package that their soul comes in when they have to eat and go to the bathroom and do
Right. So that's why I said it's all relative. It's definitely true, but you can't compare that to the person who does business in Manhattan and is dealing with many other things. That's why I said it's relative. For example, today we don't have people who live like that, but you do have people that their livelihood is learning in yeshiva all day, or their livelihood is teaching Torah all day. They go home, a very normal life, but relatively speaking, these are the people which are more like Bittul B'Metzias, and these are the people who are more like Bittul Hayesh. So let's start with these words, Kiyadua. Again, this is the line, that last word on the line is Lamaila. And we're starting with the part where the eyes, the heart is up and the eyes are down. Kiyadua, as it's known, this is the deeper meaning to the words of our sages. Hamaspala, when a person davens, his eyes should be directed downwards, but his heart should be directed lamaila, upward. Pirush liba lamaila, what does it mean his heart should be directed upwards? That means his baranus b'muhusiv atzmusi yizbarach. He should meditate on the essence of Hashem. He should meditate on the upper, the higher level of oneness of Hashem. How Hashem is infinite, He's exalted, He's removed from all the worlds, and the whole universe and the whole creation is insignificant in comparison to Hashem, as we explained this before. So that's understanding the oneness of Hashem, Bittul B'Metzias, in the deepest way. Let's take at the end of the line. Nevertheless, he still has to have his eyes directed downward. What does that mean? To focus on the world, which is yesh, which is a substance. He should understand he should also, in his mind, perceive the idea of bittul yesh. Why? If you would only and exclusively think about the higher level of unity, how Hashem is absolutely one and He's infinite and the whole world is nothing, after he finishes davening, when he opens up his eyes, and he sees this world out there, and he sees things are happening and people are making money and people are doing things and there's this pleasure and that pleasure, he might fall from his high level, even though he was on a high level, and he'll be trapped in the nets of the physical pleasures, which means he'll be attracted to it, he'll be schlepped into it, and then he'll end up making all these physical, material pleasures in this world as this primary thing in life, and spirituality will become secondary. Like there's a pasuk that says that a person closes his eyes, then he opens his eyes, and you close your eyes, nothing's there. When you open your eyes, suddenly you see a world that you didn't see before. But if a person is davening, and during davening, he has his eyes downward, meaning that he's also focusing on the second level, bittul hayesh, the hisik bittul hayesh lashura, la yipel chas v'shalom, then he won't fall. Because in the Sama says, like Hashem lamata beini basar, because now he sees Hashem, but he also sees Hashem and perceives him from a way that he could relate it to this physical world. I mean, in simple words, this is what the Rebbe would always say to make a hachlata. Sometimes a person is just on a high. Something happened. Today I was davening and wow, I haven't felt like this in a long time. Or today I went to Fabrengen and somehow they sang a niggin and wow, I haven't felt like this in a long time. It's beautiful, it's amazing. Then what? You can just enjoy it, and then when it's over, it's over. But the Rebbe says if a person will make a hachlata then this inspiration will lead to something practical. That's number one. And number two, as a result of this practical resolution, it'll allow the inspiration to continue. It's like a fire and a wick. If you have a fire but no wick, then eventually the fire is gone. If you have a wick, you have wood, you have something holding the fire, then the fire will last. So if a person makes a hachlata, that means I'm connecting the fire to something practical, something down to earth. So number one, I have the benefit that it's leading to something practical. And number two, I have the benefit that the fire will continue to last. It won't just fade away. So that means that even though in this Maimon he speaks about bittul b'metzias, but we also have to understand the importance of having the feeling of bittul hayesh. That's what it means when it says, you have shown us ladas that we should know, Pirush. Haneshama nizgalas beguf. The Eibishter made the neshama come down and be revealed in the body. The galas deyas nefesh abaham is the noiga. The purpose is that the godly soul should sort of teach the animal soul and understand Hashem ki havayahu elakim, that God is one, to refine the animal soul. Was ayin ba'ayin nira ki ato Hashem l'asad lovei. Pirush ozi asogas muhus alakus mamish the neshamas Yisrael. When Mashiach comes, then all of us will be able to experience in a sort of a conscious way how the world and Hashem is one. It doesn't mean the world will cease to exist and the world will disappear, but we'll recognize the oneness, how the world and Hashem is one. We'll look at the Gashmizdika world and we'll see so clearly how it's connected to spirituality. It's always something that's a little bit hard to picture. So what are we going to look? We're going to look at a tree. What are we going to see? And I can't reveal everything to you now yet, but
the tree example is like so easy because you always talk about trees in Hasidus that Hashem created every single leaf different. And
right.
That,
every blade of grass different.
Yeah. Like
and trees, your subject.
But nature, I feel is like so easy to connect to holiness.
But I think it's more than just connecting. It'll be something more visual. Again, it's hard to understand and to describe, but I'm thinking of it this way. It's like it says in the Maimon, the first part of the Maimon, when you look at a person, at a human being, what is the difference between looking at a picture or looking at a human being? A picture is just something external. It's just a form and a shape. It's just an image of something. When you look at a person, you're actually seeing something more than just flesh and blood. You're seeing a personality. You're seeing an identity here. So even though no one's going to say, oh, I see something that's not physical, I see a neshama. We don't see neshamas. We see human beings. But nevertheless, we can't say that it's totally not being grasped through this visual experience. When I look at another human being, I'm seeing more than just flesh and blood. I'm seeing a person. When Mashiach will come, somehow something like that will be with everything we look at. We'll see the godly identity in a tree, in animals, in everything that exists. We'll see the deeper dimension that's there. So then it'll be more of the bittul b'metzias. And now we're not capable of reaching that level in a real way. So now it's more the bittul hayesh. But the ability to reach that level of bittul comes mainly from eating the matzah. The matzah is what empowers us. Okay, we'll stop here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Tomorrow, Bli Neder, I'd like to go into a little bit. I'm going to learn something from another mimer. Hopefully, I'll make sure to Mrs. Yaffe will send it to everybody on Zoom, where Remember we said that when you understand the bittul in a complete way, we also understand hashgacha pratis in a complete way. That every single detail in our lives is happening for a purpose and for a reason, and we see it from that perspective. So we want to learn a piece of a mimer that explains in a very unusual way. I don't even know there's another mimer like that that explains and elaborates on how hashgacha pratis is to the most minute detail. So stay tuned tomorrow, same channel, same time.
Question about
Yeah.
So if our purpose is to like live here like in little like little like
Yes, right.
so why are we like eating matzah and like trying to achieve like the higher type of little if that's not like the purpose?
That's a good question. But I guess the Nefesh Elokis has to experience his level of bittul in order to inspire the Nefesh Abamis to feel his level of bittul. It's a little bit like Shabbos on the weekdays. I would say that Shabbos is sort of a form of bittul b'mitzias. We don't go to work, finished. Weekdays is bittul hayesh. But in order to have the strength to live the 6 days of the week in a balanced way, we need one day like Shabbos, which is bittul b'mitzias, and that gives us the koyach that now for the next 6 days we can have the bittul hayesh, right?
So Bittul Yesh is the first level.
Right, and I just gave an example. All week long for everybody is relatively bittul hayesh. Shabbos is relatively bittul b'mitzias. It's the idea. In other words, it's relatively a kind of a life, but we're not dealing with the Gashmisdika world. Just a second. I'm just finishing a class. 1 second. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. No, I was finishing the class.